Well, we can maybe start by talking about the post that Kitsy started. There was a plugin on the market that was placed on the market that had that it was actually was just a custom URL is all the plugin was, and then the custom URL plugin pointed to a specific web app that the person had created. There also were copyright issues with that. It was a Nintendo game, so it's kind of really cool. It was a Nintendo game. My son played with it for a while. I thought it was pretty cool. So it was like a retro Nintendo NES game, but it was also something that was not, something that could not be used in the plugin, could not be put into an app and sold in any way, shape, or form because it'd be copyright issues. And also, the app was just a custom URL. That's all it was. It was just it was there was no native code in the app except for the custom URL screen. It just was running a web view. It's all the plugin did. So that was one different thing about the plugin as well. And and then I think everyone was happy at the end, but there was a lot of discussion, I think about last weekend we had this big discussion about it. So
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the things on my little list here. I'm purposely not putting it up on the screen or whatever, but I've got kind of an ongoing priority list that it's just really really hard to manage all this stuff because I literally have new products to think about, develop, maintenance stuff that we do every day, keeping the thing alive that we do every day, and then I've got this other little list that I call concerns. And
hmm
these are not, bugs or software problems that we all know exist. These are just like kind of fundamental what we are, what we do, what we stand for kind of concerns. And like, do we need to make adjustments and take a different direction in certain kind of areas? And always on my list of concerns from the beginning is, the plugin market itself is a kind of a hotbed for some of those topics for lots of different reasons.
hmm
And so on my little list, I've got some bullet things that we can talk about or whatever. And then you said you mentioned that you had five. Do you want
yeah.
to tell the gang here a little bit about kind of what you've been working on in terms of like maybe a policy or whatever? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm not really sure where this is going to go, but I think it would be. I kind of see this as friendly, as long as we can. If we can police ourselves and have these be friendly guidelines written by the plugin developers for the plugin developers,
Exactly.
and then so it's not. I hate to have Buzztouch end up being the police saying, "Okay, no, 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 you must not do this."
Yeah.
I talked to David, and I'd rather have it just be that we all kind of come to a consensus about what is good behavior and what is behavior we don't want to see and how we manage the plugin market. And then if we see something that violates that, then we maybe send a PM or we contact the developer and say this doesn't seem like it's consistent with our guidelines that how we're doing this, and then we kind of can work things out versus Buzztouch just coming out and saying you shall not do this, you shall not do that. The other thing too
Exactly.
is if Buzztouch were to do that kind of dictatorial approach, you must not do this, you must not do that, then people are always going to find some way to go around it anyway. So it's always better to have like a looser have the principle rather than the specific letter of the law, so that we have that's why guidelines or principles or something like that.
Yeah. No. Exactly. And I think that I think we've got two, really three, but two kind of fundamental ideas here that I think anybody in their right mind is going to agree with in principle, and
Mhm.
agree with in spirit, and agree with in conversation. So it'd be like one side. In other words, I don't doubt that there's anybody. I mean, I can't think of anybody in our audience who wouldn't agree with the general spirit of what we're trying to do, right, in words. But on the other hand, in behavior, sometimes this is where it starts to get a little bit weird. It,
Mhm.
because somebody agrees that we have this set of guidelines that we all wrote and we all kind of put our stamp of approval on, us and the developers and everybody really. Just because you say that you understand them doesn't mean that you actually do, and it certainly doesn't mean that you actually behave that way. And a classic example of that is the famous Apple developer guidelines, right? I mean, they've got this big thick book of guidelines, and yet perfectly professional, wonderful, reasonable, honest, great developers are constantly running into friction
Mhm.
because their interpretation of the guidelines doesn't match the interpretation that, in this case, Apple put forth. And so Apple's a little bit different than us, well, a lot, but
Yeah.
they're a little bit different than us in that they're very obviously and very publicly saying our market, our rules.
Hmm.
We're at least trying to make the claim and trying to be genuine to the claim that this is a market for our plugin developers and less so for us. Now, we all know that there is some amount of revenue, some amount of money, changing hands that we do take a little piece of. But I think that everybody who knows us well enough, and that's certainly all of our plugin developers, recognizes that we're not earning money out of the plugin market. It costs us, at least as much to even have the thing, both in actual dollars and time and grief and all these kinds of things. And so we really are all about having a market for the developers. And so there's back to kind of summarize what I'm saying is there's what we say we agree to, and then the way we actually behave. And I think it's the actual behavior part that it's where the sticky stuff comes in, and which is why we even have meetings like this and have to have a set of guidelines and principles and all that, which we haven't had to this point.
Yeah.
And so I think really kind of boils down to is, what is the purpose of the plugin market? What's the purpose? Is the purpose to make better apps? Is the purpose to help people make money? Because certainly the developers are making money, some of them. Is the purpose to, share code and extend and be friendly and nice? What is the actual purpose? And so the original purpose, in my mind, and Sue, you were involved in this when we opened it up and said, let's let people make plugins. The original purpose was really twofold. We wanted people to make better apps. We wanted to allow people who didn't know how to program and didn't know how to do this to assemble better apps. And we also wanted to provide a way for people who were enthusiastic about our platform and our system to enjoy themselves and program and have a good time and maybe make a little money. That was the original purpose, and that was kind of the spirit of it. And now what we've had as the thing slowly matures and turns into an actual marketplace, we have a little of that and a little of a lot of other things. You use the word like taking advantage or exploiting, or these words come to mind. And then we have things like copyright issues, and we have things like quality issues, and we have things like stealing issues, and we have things like distribution issues where people are taking other people's work and putting them on their own site, all these kinds of things. And so those are my biggest concerns. And the reason that they're my concerns are not rooted in a selfish kind of behavior. Like, let's take the case where somebody downloads a bunch of plugins and offers them on their site. It doesn't change anything for us. But short term, it absolutely does. And it dilutes what we're trying to do, which will make developers who have supported us all along ultimately be the losers because this thing won't exist. That is the reality, right? We have to do some level of protecting our environment, or 3 years from now, it won't be here because they'll be in 800 different places. And so these are the reasons why I think about this stuff, is trying to literally kind of protect what we've made long term so that people can continue to participate and we can continue to do what we like to do. And so those are my concerns. And I'm not sure if we want to address them one at a time or if we want to, dissect any of those concepts. I mean, Sue, do you have anything along those lines?
That list. I'm looking at that list I wrote on my phone, but one thing my first one was that always give recognition to developers if you use their code, and I think that goes beyond Buzztouch developers. But if you use someone's code, if you use a Buzztouch developer's code, you should get their permission. And if you use another, like you get something from GitHub, and you incorporate that into a plugin, you should make sure that there's a copyright for it. And if you have permission to do that, and if you do, you should still give them credit. You shouldn't ever portray that, oh, I made this great code, when you actually got it from someplace. When you got the code, and all you did was made that existing code into a plugin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just speaks to the whole spirit of open source copyright, blatant plagiarism.
Well, it's plagiarism, but it's giving credit where credit's due, and that's what BuzzTouch is about. We're not about trying to, we're a community. We try to help each other. We try to support each other, and part of that is giving recognition for where you got the code.
Yeah, totally. So as a guideline, you're suggesting that we just have to literally tell people that because they don't necessarily understand that on their own?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the issues that Kitsy brought up, is that in the case of this plugin, it was actually just a a website that the guy he had done some work to customize it, but it wasn't his own code. He had done some work to make it prettier, but he had not. It was not his code, and I don't think there was recognition of that. And
Yeah, that's an
he changed
interesting
that
point.
plugin, but
That's an interesting point because as we browse the plugin market today,
mhm.
I mean, it's clear that lots and lots of these things are not the code of the person who's selling them in the market.
Yeah.
Somebody has figured out how to package something up and make $1, but they haven't figured out how to make something of any quality. They just figured out how to take something.
Yeah.
I mean, do we think that there's a guideline along those lines? I mean, do we want to get into the position where, you know, on one hand, I can imagine, and again, it's how you interpret it. Like I can imagine a plugin that helps somebody implement an SDK that might be complicated otherwise, right? And so it's a plugin developer who said, look, I think this is a cool SDK I use. It's hard to get it in your project, so I'm going to make a plugin to make that easier.
Yeah.
So in theory, it's not really their code that's made a great plugin. It's their conceptual understanding of something that's the value for the person who buys that plugin.
Yeah.
But that's completely different than saying, look, I made a game that you can have for $5, when clearly that's not the case.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that kind of dilemma? I mean, do we literally say in the guidelines, look, if you didn't make it, then you shouldn't sell it?
No, I just think that if you that you make sure that it's okay that you use it. In fact, if you may want to like I guess if I was going to like make something and use someone else's code, I would almost write to the developer and say, is it okay if I make your code into a plugin? By the way, you're giving out this code, but I'm planning on selling that. Do you mind? And then you kind of have their permission to do that. So that you hate to have that developer who wrote this big thing who thought it wasn't really worthy of selling, seeing his code in a plugin that's being sold on the plugin market, and there's no recognition for him. And even if there's recognition, that I guess I would just want to know if I had put my heart and soul into some code and then made it available for free to people, and they found out other people were selling it, or just repackaging it and selling it as a plugin. I guess I don't know. I might feel like I could have made some money on that. I gave it away, but then someone else sold it.
Well, and at minimum, this is where you begin to go into the area where, we at Buzztouch look bad because we're, condoning this, even though we don't philosophically condone this stuff, because we have an open market and it's happening. In essence, we are condoning it.
Yeah.
If you don't know our system, if you're the guy who wrote that game, and you see that it's in this Buzztouch website system thing, you don't know anything about Buzztouch, you're like, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just a polite thing to do. And then the other thing that Kitsy brought up was that really you should like share where you found the code, because the more advanced developers may just not want to buy your plugin, they just want to do it themselves. And I think that's a little more optional, but I also feel like just because you found a good link doesn't mean that you should get paid for having a plugin.
Exactly.
And that's what Kitsy's point was, is that if you make a plugin that's really just a URL, then you should you should share, say where you got it from, so that a person can make themselves, because anyone that's on this call here now could actually just make that plugin themselves. Well, now in this case of this Nintendo game, there was some cover work that was done, some CSS work on it to make it more interesting, and to change the name of it and stuff. But
yeah,
so I'm not saying that anyone could do it, but I'm saying if it could be done, I don't know. That's the thought. So what I ended up writing was, give recognition to developers' code, including the link where you found the code. And I think if you're going to use code from another Buzztouch developer, you should ask their permission too.
Let's change the subject a little bit and talk about this self-hosting dilemma that we have.
Oh yeah.
And again, the spirit of what we do and what we actually end up doing sometimes conflict. So the spirit of what the self-hosting software package is for is not to provide you a vehicle to give away people's plugins. And that happens, right? The purpose of that package is not to allow you to promote, your own little app builder site that's, better and cheaper and more convenient than Buzztouch. So look, I've bought all these plugins for us, and I'm going to give them to the world. Now the reality of it is once again, doesn't hurt us that bad, Buzztouch. Most of these sites are frankly elementary. They're generally amateur looking and fly by night kind of feeling, but they do happen. And the feeling is, you know, we know that these sites are generally not going to last very long because they generally don't. A few months, they're gone usually. Because it's a lot more work than they realize. They think they're going to exploit something. They try, they set up an Amazon server, they throw a WordPress website together, they put together some kind of an offer, and people see right through it, and it doesn't generally last. But even if it only lasts a couple of months, if you're the plugin developer who worked on something and put it in the plugin market, you didn't do that with the idea that somebody was going to download it and then give it away for you. To their little world or their audience. So that's problematic. Now, I don't want to call that stealing, but in my mind, that is stealing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's not cool.
Stealing, yeah.
So how do we both in a guideline and in a principle, how do we get around this idea? Because part of the problem is kind of in the spirit of what we're trying to do, and then part of the problem is technically what we're trying to do. And let me unpack that a little bit. The self-hosted panel right now does not allow individual users to install plugins. And the reason for this is the self-hosted package is not intended for people to be, you know, hey, use my app builder. That's not the reason it exists. But we all know that lots of people use it that way, and they build their own little apps tonight website. Use my app builder. They build seriously, they build a registration screen, which takes 2 seconds, and they say, look at my magic app builder. They clearly don't understand the reason the self-hosted package exists, or they're just blatantly trying to make a buck, which is bad in both cases. But the reason that the plugins aren't installed user by user in the control panel in the self-hosted version is because we don't want you. No one wins by you getting your 8 app-making customers to pay you $1 a week or whatever to use your control panel. They should just be over at Buzztouch. There's no benefit. The benefit comes when you make an app for somebody or yourself, and you want to self-host the data and take control over that data. That's the reason that exists. And so that's why the plugins aren't hooked to owners in the control panel, in the self-hosted panel. They're hooked to the administrator of the software. And so it's easy to imagine now why somebody might say, hey, I've installed all these plugins. I can't sell them to my customers because they're in the admin side of the software. So everyone who uses my software gets them. Well, true, but that's just backing up a little bit. Again, they're missing the point. What do you mean everybody that uses your software? Who's using your software? So that's the question, right? And so that's where a lot of this problem comes in. That's where a lot of this problem comes in. And so that's both a plugin problem and kind of a self-hosted problem, right? I mean, it would be easy for us to just not distribute the self-hosted package, and so you can't do that because of all these problems that we've learned over the last few years in giving people the package. But we don't want to do that. We want to keep it open source and keep it, you know, here you go, use it, host it on your own, and we trust that you're not going to try to compete with us.
And I guess if your self-hosting model means that developers will not be paid for plugins, that would not be appropriate. That is not good behavior. That's not a good community behavior to give away plugins. You know, the idea is that every user, not every client would pay for the plugins, but every user, every person that initiates an app would pay for the plugin. So if your model leads to developers not getting paid for plugins, then that's the model that's not fair to your fellow plugin developers.
Bingo. So I don't know how to really word that, but that's definitely on my list of concerns. Is this pot? And here's what happens: they come and they go. These sites. We see them all the time. People send me a link every day. Have you seen this? And it's a blue and purple Buzztouch control panel with the Powered by Buzztouch removed, and a new logo on the upper left-hand side, and a marquee down the middle that says "My Magic App Builder. Start here for some price." Right. That's what they do. And it's
my favorite is when they say powered by Buzztouch, they change it to powered by their company.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's just like so wrong in so many ways.
Silly.
That's why
it's just total amateur. And so again, for us, laughable, but if you're the plugin developer, not laughable.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute, this guy's buying plugins, this person's buying plugins from the market for $5, $20, $50, whatever the price is, and they're using them in a way that is not intended.
Right.
So do we just explain that in the spirit of what we're trying to do, or do we just like make a policy? Or I mean, of course I could just make decisions and say, don't do that, and start kicking people out. But like Sue said, that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, exactly. It's and then we also found out that Barry had posted that he wasn't even sure how those plugins got there because he had never shared them.
No, totally.
Well, that's really scary if it's not even a plugin that's available on the market yet, and it gets into. That's just, I don't know. There's a lot wrong with that. But anyway, if the solution means that developers do not get paid for the plugin, that would be a bad solution. Now, say you're using self-hosted and you're running a class and you're teaching 10 students how to make an app, and each student has their own app. I think that would be okay. Essentially each student is acting as your client in that way, and you're letting each student make their own app. To me that would be appropriate. It's not really a for-profit purpose. It's an educational purpose.
I think the bottom line is if you have a commercial offer on your website, if you're offering something for sale, some kind of a service, some kind of a solution, you shouldn't be selling people's code.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And if you're teaching kids how to make apps in a school, that's an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of that simple. And so, again, it just speaks to, some people's words they say they understand, but their behavior suggests that they don't understand.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of issues with like culturally and like where they come from. And so, all those kinds of excuses. Well, where we come from, which is Monterey, California, you don't take people's code. Yeah. I don't know where you come from. And frankly, I don't care. The code you're taking is coming from Monterey, and it's not cool. Yeah. You spent a lot of time helping people understand how this works, and you're taking advantage of them.
I think like Mr. David and Chris One have had solutions where they sold self-hosting, but each person who's self-hosting has to buy their own membership with Buzztouch, and then it only pings and gets the config file only is looking for the plugins that person has purchased. That's totally an okay solution.
Completely appropriate. That's the whole point.
That's totally
exactly
okay.
Right. So it's demonstrating a sensitivity to us and the developer. That's what we really, really want.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's another one out there. Here's another classic example. There's another little rumor. I don't want to call it a rumor, but there's another little meme floating around that one of our self-hosting superfans is, has figured out a way to bypass the API call download limit that we impose on people. I mean, think about how silly that is. And it just, again, speaks to the idea that sometimes people spend more time trying to get around rules that they just don't understand what we're all about. And those aren't people that I want to spend my time with. And it's certainly not people that I want to help make a living. I'm trying to help people. You know what I mean? All of us are. And so anyway, there's all these different little nuances, and it normally boils down to this question mark around what they're using their self-hosted panel for. Why is it that your customers are so better off going to your panel? And if you can show me a good list, great, that makes sense. But in most cases, the only reason that they don't want them to go to Buzztouch is they don't want them to know their secret.
Yeah.
Well, aren't we? I mean, if you're afraid to tell people that you use Buzztouch to make apps, there's something really wrong with your model.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
There's something wrong with your model, and you clearly haven't reached the professional level yet.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, there's my little rant on that. We touched on theft a little bit. I mean, what is theft? Just blatant taking of these things. The part that I always dread is, the what do we do about this part? And so Sue and I, and a lot of you developers have been hearing us talk about this for a long time. The first thing that we're going to do is come up with what we're showing you right here in front of us. We're going to come up with these guidelines and principles. And I guess I would say that it's your opportunity now, all of you, to kind of speak up a little bit. It doesn't have to literally be right now, but in email to Sue here in the next week or two or whatever. We got to get everybody's perspective on here because you're the ones that these guidelines are built to protect. It's not about us. We could easily protect our plugin market by just not making it open anymore. But we want to keep it open, which is how you guys can explore and find code and make a few bucks. And so I would suggest to you that if you have some ideas for these guidelines, that you send them to us so that we can bake them in, because we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. Really, there's only a few different kinds of guidelines on our site. One of them is the forum. Stephen and I were talking yesterday about revisiting the forum guidelines, because there's some blatant things that have been occurring over the last year or so that just aren't addressed in the guidelines that we could easily add, just so that we could say, look, you say that you understand what the forum's for, but your behavior doesn't match. So what are we going to do? Write a friendly email kind of thing. But until we write it down, how can we expect people to know that?
Well, I think some of it, I wish people would just know it, because they would just, know, they'd be able to judge right from wrong. And
yeah, but they don't automatically do that.
But not really clear. We have a lot of young people on the forum too that just maybe don't know, and people from other countries, maybe they have different values. But the second one I had on here, I wanted to ask you about, but I had okay, if your plugin is not not native code, so I wonder if I kind of thought my sense of that fact that there was a plugin that was not native code, it's just a web app, that's totally okay, but it should be outlined very clearly to the user that you're not doing a native code app. Because some people are selling apps to clients, and they're selling the Buzztouch app as a app in native code, and now it's a web app, so it's not really in native code. And so I think I wonder what you thought about that, David. If that was an appropriate principle that people should have a clear disclaimer if it's going to be a web app.
Yeah, by the way, the slang that most of us use for that is a wrapper, right? When you make an app that's just nothing more than a wrapper around a web view.
A wrapper.
This is exactly what lots and lots of problems in the App Store are rooted in, because Apple's so hardcore against this idea. There's a really cool piece of software on your phone called Safari, and it works really well for web apps. But we all know that if you have a web page web app,
yeah,
you don't get to do things like exploit the App Store marketing reach. You don't get to do things like, ooh, look at my App Store icon, right? There's a sensationalized value in being in the App Store. So lots and lots of developers out there are saying, I made you an app, when really they're just wrapping a web page. So we all know the concept, and wrapper is the slang for that. And so as it relates to a plugin, I think the worst plugin in our market that's caused most of the problems is the web view, right? The URL and the web view that I made originally to help people get content in an iPhone. Yeah. That's problematic. And very rarely is that the best way to get your content in an iPhone. But recognizing that people who don't know how to make apps need that little facility to show text and to show graphics because they're HTML, fluent,
yeah,
was the idea. Well, as it turned out, they're not HTML fluent. They're copy and paste fluent. Yeah. And they're, URL paste from the address bar fluent. So it turned into just kind of a joke. And this URL and web view that is part of the iOS developer kit exists for very specific reasons that do not include making web apps. That's not the reason that it exists in the UI kit, right? And so again, a misunderstanding. So if you're going to,
I wonder if you're going farther than me. Then I was saying it was okay as long as you disclose it, but maybe we want to have a policy that plugins should be native code.
Well, but there are use cases when it makes perfect sense. Again, the UI kit includes the UI web view. Yeah. For a reason. It's a good tool and it's awesome to do useful things, right? There's nothing wrong with the web view. Don't get me wrong. But when used inappropriately, then you're making web apps. Yeah. And so I could give a whole lesson on what the difference in that is and all those kinds of things. But really fundamentally is if, the thing needs to load content from the phone natively without an internet connection, right? And if it can't do that, I would really put a big question mark as to what is this thing. So if it's just loading a web page, then launch an external app, take them out of your app and go to Safari. That's the whole point. But as it relates to a plugin, I don't want to just abandon UI web view, right? That would be bad. But at the same time, we do want to prevent people from just wrapping a UI web view with a URL and calling that a plugin. That isn't a plugin. That's like a shortcut. I mean, you could think of it this way. You're basically screwing people out of $5. Right now, you can launch a custom third-party app, Safari, with a URL to your Nintendo game. It's the exact same thing, with one big exception. You leave your app.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So that's what people are trying to circumnavigate. Well, Apple wants you to leave the app. They want you to use the proper tool for the job, right? Safari loads web content.
Right.
So then you've got all the power of Safari with shortcuts and favorites and add to your desktop and all these other wonderful things that Safari does. And so,
do you think maybe we should have a policy that we don't want to have just only a web view, a wrapper around the web view?
But how could you do that? How could you successfully, not just come up with the policy, but also monitor it and understand it, right? People, it's this misunderstanding that gets people in this trap. It's not really the blatant exploitation.
Maybe we add something that says this is not appropriate use. Buzztouch does not consider this a valid plugin or something, or make it a little stronger.
Or the Buzztouch plugin developer community doesn't, right? I mean, again, we all collectively have to decide what we want to allow and disallow.
Yeah.
And remember, and we need to be honest to that. I mean, if this audience wants to allow that kind of thing, it's all of our market. It's not, that isn't necessarily bad to think in those terms. If we think there's value in those plugins, that's a different kind of concept. But my hunch is none of us think there's value in them, which is why there's no ratings and there's no sales. People don't buy them. Nobody cares. So, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you could say non-native, or that doesn't really work, because a web view is native. It's a part of the UI kit. I can load things into it with HTML. That's all native-y. That's part of the project, and it works real well, and it does a lot of cool things when used appropriately. So I don't know what the word non-native means.
So non-native is not the right way to say, but if the plugin is just a wrapper around a web view, it certainly should be disclosed in the README. And well, maybe we just say we don't. That gets us out of here to say we don't consider this a valid plugin.
Yeah. So like in the control panel, what do these things have? One setting?
Yes, it's just all there was in the plugin was just a link to it was just a URL is all it was. It was the custom URL plugin with it automatically loaded that one URL. There's no control
So when you went to your Buzztouch control panel and you looked at that screen, what were the options? None?
I didn't know. I didn't go to it to see, but none. There were no options. And that's what's happening too. That's another point of Kitsy's too. And I think we should talk about that one. Is that as many variables as possible should be in the control panel, because that's what the point of Buzztouch is to put those variables in the control panel. And if there's not a control panel, then there should be variables in the control panel.
Big red flag. Big red flag. Smug's saying, just a little tangent here, Smug's saying coded or wrapped. I like those words. Those are good words to try to differentiate between. So let's take this down a little bit of a tangent here, Sue, without making any, we're not rules people, right? We don't like rules, but we certainly need to try to help facilitate a good, successful process for everybody.
Yeah.
Us, users, developers. So maybe something along these lines, and I don't want to use the wrong words, but ratings have a certain context. They have a certain context, and honestly, they're not as used as often as we'd like. We'd like to have these plugins rated more often. That's always been a problem. We don't really help people learn that they should rate them or whatever, but the rating's one idea. But the other idea is this concept of flagging plugins. And if you flag a plugin and leave a comment, it's not a flame. It's not necessarily saying this is bogus and shouldn't exist. It's just saying, hey, do we really want this in our market kind of thinking? Yeah. And maybe we just have a little flag button on every plugin, and it allows the same kind of concept. And if, a certain number is reached, I don't know. The problem with that is you got to buy it to then flag it, and I don't think that's cool.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so if we have a clear principle that we don't think it's a valid plugin if it's just a wrapper around a web view, then I would feel like as a plugin developer, I can go and say that in a review, 1 star. See the guidelines. This is not a valid plugin per the Buzztouch guidelines for plugins, and that could be someone's review, and that way it's self-policed.
Yeah.
No.
That's an idea. Not valid. I'm not sure if valid's the right word, or maybe not a useful plugin. I don't know.
Not a useful or
not an appropriate plugin. Maybe I'm not sure what the wording is.
Not yeah.
Yeah, I mean, any of those will work for this audience.
But if we have like numbers, we can actually say this is for our value number 2, or what our guideline number 2. This violates guideline number 2, whatever it is, and they just and then if they get it, then there's some bad reviews out there, and people are not going to buy it, and then it's self-policed, because we are trying to make Buzztouch as much as possible an independent community, not Buzztouch leadership's not deciding things and doing things. We're trying to as a community work these things out together, and that'd be a way we could self-police.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna change the subject a little bit off another path because it's 1:45 already. I'm gonna let's let this one kind of simmer a little bit with this concept, this idea.
Okay.
This document that Sue just started in front of us is a collection of kind of thoughts and everything that would, it might sound like we just kind of threw up there right now, but we really have been talking about this for a long time. Let's kind of, before we take a turn here, why don't we just say, hey, if you guys want to add to this, just send Sue your thoughts. Let's collect them all together in a document and get all the ideas in one list.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the next time we meet, we go through that big list.
Yeah,
Let's try to do that.
Yeah, enough talking about this. Yeah, I'll take the comments from that forum post, this stuff, and then come and work on something, and then.
If you want to start a new forum post about it to collect the comments on the forum, that's completely
Oh,
okay.
idea.
I can stick it to the top,
Yeah, good idea.
so you can seed it with what we wrote right here.
Yeah.
But here's another pressing issue, that stuff that we've been working on that we're just doing our best to kind of roll out, that I need some feedback on from this group. The way that the plugin market exists is, we all know, is just a generic list of plugins, and it needs to be, I don't want to use the word redesigned, because we've already got all the design work done in terms of our new brand and our new style, and everybody who was at Code Camp and BuzzCon in Vegas and all that saw a bit of this new brand. So it's not really branding and graphics and thinking along those lines. It's more of a, how do we want to communicate to the visitors of the plugin market? How should this plugin market look and feel? And so the obvious things are obvious, right? Search box and sort. I mean, we've been talking about that for a year and a half. And the reason that I haven't thrown on the plugin market a simple show me the newest and show me the most rated and give me a search box is because I don't think that's I don't think that's the best approach. I think there's a better approach that we just haven't come up with yet. And so we need to start hearing from you guys who are always saying, let's redesign the plugin market. Okay, what does that mean? So think of things like categories, for example, and think about the consequences of each of these decisions that we make. Categories. Nobody's putting these in categories right now. Nobody as in the plugin developers, and certainly not us, nobody's selecting an appropriate category. So now, is that something that the plugin developer does? Is that something that we do? Is that something? So these kinds of ideas aren't necessarily as easy as they might sound. Aside from a search box and some basic things like the newest and the most rated and all that, what are some other ways that we can make this plugin market manageable? The App Store does it with a lot of complexity. How you look for apps in the Apple App Store or the Google Play market. But ultimately, it's really dependent on you knowing what you're searching for. I mean, you've got some highlighted things right in front of you. Yes, they've got categories, and each one of them basically produces, a top list in each category. And then beyond that, you got to find it. You got to search for it. So the problem that we're going to have is, we've only got 150 of these things to deal with. We don't want to bury anybody's plugins. And now they are buried because you just scroll down forever kind of thing. And people understand that if I submit a new one, it goes to the top of the list, and people are kind of gaming it a little bit, and that's fine. But we need to solve that, and I need to hear from you guys. We need to hear from you guys. Some ideas. So Ed's already saying tags. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that one. Chad's saying based on sales. That's one of my favorites. It's like, what is the most popular? And by the way, Chad threw out here, will the flag be abused for people who don't have to buy the plugin to rate it? Yeah, absolutely it would be. That's kind of back to where we were, but that's a great point, Chad. Release date. Yeah, so these are all filtering mechanisms, which I really like. Is there anything else that that we're kind of missing here? Here's one example. The new design of the new site's, in my opinion, in our opinion, beautiful, right? We love it. It looks gorgeous. It's not generic, like our square orange kind of feeling has been for the past bunch of years. So we got this beautiful site. And one thing that's problematic is if we throw a bunch of plugins in the plugin market with a little 50 pixel icon, it's hard to make that beautiful, right? I mean, everything's graphically rich these days with big images, and think Retina and bright and clear. How are we going to show off plugins that we haven't yet collected any high quality artwork for. Ideally, we don't want to start collecting high quality artwork because that's just a yet another pain in the butt for somebody trying to make a plugin. And so we talked about, instead of using the icon, maybe we use screenshots as the display in the screen in the market instead of the icon. And maybe we focus on some screenshots, and maybe something along the lines of, you know, the first screenshot in your screenshot folder is what's going to show in the App Store, or in the App Store, the plugin market. And if we just made a decision like that, it wouldn't require additional work. You know, it wouldn't require all of the developers having to relearn how to kind of game the store. And so, because we don't want to game the store, we're just saying we want it to be prettier and more telling and more modern, aside from filtering and searching and all that kind of stuff. So these are the thoughts that maybe there's some creativity in our group here, that we just haven't heard yet. You know, I don't know. One thing that I really like, and it's quite technological, but also very possible, is, you know, I really like the idea of seeing screenshots of people's apps that have used the plugin, not the plugin developers' screenshots.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference. And so the reason that I say that there's a big difference is it's not very uncommon for a plugin to be ugly when it's in the wild, because the person using it didn't know how to make it pretty. And it's technically a cool plugin, but it's a different, you know, it's a different concept. So we could very easily bake into the Buzztouch core a way to submit screenshots of apps running in the simulator to the plugin market. And I wanted people to kind of feel that idea out. Like, as a developer, is that threatening? Is that bad? You know, is that just silly? But that was one kind of concept that I really like, because I want to see dozens of pictures of screenshots, and I don't want the developers to be burdened with, I mean, we all know it. It's one thing to make a plugin. It's another thing to go through and configure it in a million different ways to come up with different screenshots, right? It's kind of a pain. Oh, yeah. So if that's already happening in the control panel when users use it, doesn't it make sense that we would capture those screenshots? Mm-hmm. So we don't want to burden the person making the app. It's not their job to go out of their way to send screenshots of their app, which might be a secret. Mm-hmm. But it's just an idea to unpack. A-Train's got a great point here. Look at the WordPress plugin market. Totally. The WordPress plugin market is very sophisticated. I would call it kind of support-based, right? It's all about conversation around a plugin. We tried that in the early days, having like different threads for different plugins and, like, you know, frequently asked questions and stuff. And maybe we do need to get back to that. Mm-hmm. But really what happened early on was people didn't do it, and they went to the forum instead. And we just never really drove. We ended up with conversations in two different places. Mm-hmm. It just didn't work out very well.
Yeah. I think my thought on the plugin market is that there should be two phases. Just get anything up that's easy. Just put like a sort or a list view, something that's easy just right away, and then we'll have a longer term view on it and do something fancier. But in this case, perfect is the enemy of the good. While we're waiting for this perfect solution for the plugin market, if we could just actually add a search, that would actually be great. Add a search or add any kind of sorting, add whatever's easiest.
Yeah. No, Ed, you got a great point. Niraj did an amazing job on his screenshots. There's no doubt about it. But my point is, I think Niraj spent a lot more time making these screenshots, which actually came from, you know, that Buzz Day in San Diego when you guys did so much work that day, which is cool. These are awesome. But my point is, the time that it took to prepare those is problematic. Ideally, the developers wouldn't, in a perfect world, they wouldn't have to do it, is all I was saying. Yeah. Is all I was saying, because, again, you know, how much time did, I don't know. It's just my
that's what happened to me this weekend. I was just finishing a plugin. I've been working on it for like 3 or 4 months, and finally I just said I got to get this thing on the market. And so I got it all done, and then I had to make screenshots, and then I went over to the Buzz chat, Mr. David's Buzz chat, and was complaining about having to make screenshots. And then CakeBake said, "Oh, I'll make some for you." And so he made me some really nice screenshots. So it was really nice that he did that. But it's fantastic. Yeah, it's kind of cool and that's what the Buzztouch community is about. Is you need help, you're not as good at artwork, but you have a cool plugin. Someone else actually does the artwork, and that's why our community is so great. And that's why we really got to try to have this. That's why we got to work through all the issues that we have with um, people maybe not doing, not everyone having the same standards or ethics of what they're doing, because the community is what makes the bus touch so great. That someone would just volunteer to make some screenshots for me just to be nice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true. So I guess to summarize, what I'm saying is we need to come up with a way to not only how the plugin market should look, but how it goes down, how it goes down. And we can do that a few ways. We can do it on our own. Keep in mind, and this is kind of funny. This is totally funny. It was probably a year ago. I can't remember where I was, but it was in person. It might have been San Diego 6, 8 months ago. I can't remember. But anyway, it was in person. And somebody was asking me, I can't remember who it was, what's with the, and it was literally about not the plugin market, but the website itself, right? The website itself. Somebody said to me, like, why is it so ugly?
Oh.
And they said, and they were being kind. They weren't being mean, but they were just dumbfounded that we would have this very generic, plain, mid-2000s looking website. And so we were talking about this idea of how I agreed that I wish it was awesome and beautiful, how once it felt that way, but it doesn't feel that way anymore. And to a certain degree, it doesn't feel that way because people tell me all the time. And another way, people, as we all mature online, right? And trends change and things change. So anyways, he said to me, hey, when you get some time, why don't you, work on the website and redesign the website? And I said to him, well, the website that you see, that's the best I could do when I designed it then.
Mm-hmm.
The best that I can do if I redesigned it tomorrow still might not be good enough for you. So it works, it's fine, and I agree it could be prettier, it could be nicer, but really it's the best I can do. I'm not that kind of mind, right? So we laughed about this idea. So my point in this thing is, if we are the ones, Sue and I and our little group, if we sketch up and design up an HTML5 on the market, it's going to be with our best effort, which isn't necessarily going to be the best. Mm-hmm. And so there might be a completely different way to do it that we just didn't even consider. Mm-hmm. So maybe our army here can, I don't know, draw things up, sketch it out. Maybe it's another forum post. I don't know. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and I don't want to do it again and then have it people, that's not right and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think you're right, Sue. I think it's a two-thing. I think it's a two-arm. Maybe filter it and sort it first, and then try to get more sophisticated after that.
Well, the thing too is if we get fancier, then the developers have to add things to their plugins so they can be sorted differently. Like right now, we only have the menu, screens, and splash, right? Just those three. But if we want to add more categories, then we have to wait. They have to all be,
Yeah, and by the way, I'm glad you brought that up. Menus, screens, and splash, or content screens, or whatever. Originally, that had nothing to do with any market, right? Those designations are there for technical reasons, not for market reasons, right? And so now, as it's all evolved, way horribly inadequate to try to say, okay, everything is either a menu or content or a splash. Right, there's a million variances on that, and so I don't but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it can.
But if we want a sorting mechanism, like a game versus some kind of utilitarian thing like the timer, if we want some more sorting things like that, then we have to add those variables to the to the config.txt file, and they're not there now.
Well, they don't have to be in the config.txt file. I mean, it depends on who chooses what categories they go in.
Oh, okay.
In other words, they could be newly submitted. Mm-hmm. That's a category, newly submitted, and then somebody, us, the community, whatever, can assign or tags, like Ed was saying, tags to anything we want. That honestly doesn't have anything to do with the config file.
That's true. For the go with tags.
Yeah, so we just tag it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a minimum, and so yeah, I think I've already gotten a lot out of this meeting. I mean, Sue, the takeaway from this was we got to get these guidelines created and
Mhm.
published,
Mhm.
and we should do that, efficiently, but we don't want to rush.
Yeah.
So how long do you think we should give the gang here, the army here? You can send an email out to all the people with a developer code,
Mhm.
time to provide their own comments, because it's going to take some time to gather that, or do you want to use the forum to do it?
Well, I kind of wish people could talk in this meeting, and they can't. And so that's right now. It's just you and me having a conversation and a few little bit of chatting. So I don't feel like we're really getting input on this yet.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
So I think what I'll do is I think I'll go back to those things I already wrote up. Although we did some changing on this number two that I had on here, and then I'll add this piece about the self hosting, and then maybe something I'll kind of draft up something to run past people, and then
Okay.
I kind of would rather keep it out of the forum if it's okay, because I feel like it might be a little negative. Some of the it's interesting because like we're a family, we all know each other, we have these relationships, but then new people to Buzztouch, if they read the forum post that Kitsy started, it might look like we all hate each other when actually we're actually siblings that love each other, that have this little have some disagreements about boundaries, really, essentially. And
Maybe we need
so
a war room. Maybe we need a war room forum.
yeah, war room forum. But anyway, does that make sense? So maybe I should just do it. First, I'll run it through just the email list. I have over 100 people on the email list anyway. Now it's getting big, and then I'm trying to get feedback that way, and then it has to go to the forum eventually, right? To make sure everyone sees it. I'm not sure.
I'll leave that up to you and the gang. I mean, I just want to know that I think it was your idea who said we should have a printed guidelines. I just want to know that
No,
that's happening.
it came from someone else, but I thought I would. I said I would kind of organize it. So there I go.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I can do it. I'll get something to react to. But we have to have feedback, because I really see this as being valuable. If it's by the plugin developers for the plugin developers, that we agree to these guidelines or principles or whatever we call them, that we mutually agreed that this is what's appropriate behavior. And when people decide to violate that, then we call them on that, saying, "Hey, we all agreed to this. How come you're not doing this?" And
Yeah.
any of us can do that then.
Smug's thrown in there. Let me know if I can help or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable how generous, the army is with their time or whatever. And I personally, and I know we to a certain degree, but I personally have always just really struggled with being able to, if I can even say, take advantage of their offer, right, their generosity. And so you're better at that than I am or whatever. But yeah, maybe we can, task up a few of our friends with some time that are willing, and get some help on it, and just kind of put our hats together and get it done.
And maybe we can find a different time of day that people can. Well, usually more people. We actually have only up to 14, but usually more people are willing to script. Maybe no one wants to screen share because of the topic today, but usually we fill up to six, and we're not filling up to six today.
Should I
So
give them something fun to dream about and exciting news stuff, or should I just let it sit?
no, that's why we're here. Should I turn off the recording?
No, no. Yeah, turn off the recording.
Okay, sorry everyone who didn't come in person.
Since
Goodbye.
we're on the inside here.
Come in person next time.